over time, he came to be one of our best employees. He was there from the beginning right down to the end. One night, he took my daughter out on the back deck and kneeled down and said, "Hey, you see it right up there at that building?" He's like, "When I was a little boy, my parents owned a restaurant, and I lived right up there." And she just thought that was so cool. And so, yeah, there was a lot of good times. It's so hard to think of every one of them right now. Just recently, when I heard it happened to be on that day and everything else like that, Shana turned around and gave me a call and said, "I just want to let you know before it's online and stuff like that." And appreciated that, and turned around and I stepped outside for a minute. And good old Bruce Court used to play like our in-house band all the time. He was like a one-man band all the time at Bellas, and Bob loved him. And it was kind of a gift that day because I stepped out and I was in Dubuque, and I'm sitting outside in the break area just kind of hashing everything over, and all of a sudden I heard a harmonica and a guitar on that same evening, and I felt like that was a little gift from Bob. So that's all I got to say. He's a great guy, and he's definitely missed. Thank you.
Thanks, Chad.
You go through life and you meet a lot of people. You absolutely never know who they are until you have spent time with them. I was very fortunate that I knew Bob's father and I knew Bob. I met Bob's father essentially that Laurel Bergman and I are business partners. And where the tavern used to be is our office. Okay, we're in the front where the tavern is. In the back is some lawyer, but we don't talk about him. But one day, Bob Sr. came in, and he was telling us all about how this had been his bar and how he had lived upstairs and so forth. And I asked him, I said, "Well, tell me about this." I said, "It's all cut up now. There's an office in front, there's an office in back, and so forth." And he said, "Well, along this wall was the bar," and told me all about it. Now, he had spent a lot of money to buy this really, really nice bar, and that his family lived upstairs. Well, eventually, I rented the apartment upstairs, so that I find myself in this interesting position that every time that I ran into Bob, and Bob periodically came into our office to sit down for about 3 hours while we're doing business and talk about God only knows what. But I always learned something about Mount Carroll, okay? Positive or negative, but I always learned something about Mount Carroll. Well, his father came in one day and basically had a photograph of the bar, of how it looked with the very fancy back there and the long stools and so forth. And he signed this for me. And interestingly, as the years have gone on, I've had countless people ask for copies of the bar picture because it was, for the people in Mount Carroll, that was very, very important. Bob Watson told me that every single Wednesday, I believe it was, after the paper was printed, his father would go to the bar. And he said his mother would send him down to the bar to bring him back home again. Okay? And so, like I say, it's interesting. I met Bob Sr., I met Bob, I heard the stories about Bob Watson's father and about the newspaper and so forth. And it's also very interesting that Troy is talking about Bella's and Bob being in the bar. Bob was the best bartender I ever saw. Okay, no holds barred. He knew how to talk to you. I mean, if you're in a bar, frankly, you're there because you want to talk to somebody and so forth. He was also a very good mixologist. I didn't know what a martini was until he introduced me. I like gin and tonics, okay? I'm just like gin and tonics. And one day he said to me, he says, you do realize gin's supposed to be in a martini. You're not supposed to mix it around with all that watery stuff in there. So he made me one, and interestingly, I hated it. Absolutely hated it. I cannot drink a gin martini. But as far as Bob knows, and you know, Bob, I'm sorry, you introduced me, but I still don't like it. So as I say, as you go through life, you meet all sorts of people. When I was told that Bob had passed away, I literally spent probably a half an hour going through what I just told you. Bob was an influence on my life. Not because he changed my business, not because in a sense he had done anything special in my life, but Bob would periodically stop by, Bob would talk. Bob would be in his shorts, Bob would be riding. Bob absolutely still, I know Bob, still is angry at Ronnie for borrowing his bicycle one time when he came to visit and wrecking it, okay? I don't know what he did. He ran into something. And I saw Ronnie one day and I said, Ronnie, are you riding a bicycle? And he said, no, Bob won't let me ride it anymore. And I said, well, according to Bob, you stole it and you went downtown and wrecked it. I mean, this is like a few years ago. I mean, this wasn't like when they were kids, okay? The other memory I have is that one time, because Ronnie periodically would come back, about once a year, I think. But anyways, the two of them would show up in the office, and before we could throw them out, they always had to see the apartment. Okay, they always had to see the apartment. Apparently the apartment is pretty much, as far as rooms go, like it used to be. It hasn't changed at all. So the two of them would go upstairs, and I'm telling you, it was pandemonium. They go from room to room to room. They're telling stories from room to room and room and so forth. Ronnie one day pulled up the window, hanging out the second floor window, screaming at Bob Watson that, you know, hey, I'm back home again, and so forth. Like I say, the two of them were amazing. The other thing about the apartment was that we were in a living room one day, and Bob says to me, he said, the tree used to be in a corner over there. And I said, well, you know, if I put a Christmas tree up, I guess I'll remember that. That's where I'm supposed to put it. And he said, the piano was over there. And I said, you carried a piano up 22 steps? And he said, yeah, my dad did. Some of his friends and so forth. He said, I don't know if it involved alcohol or not, but they got the piano up